My mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you were going to get. This infamous quote by the fictional character Forrest Gump is what one could use to reflect on when thinking about the drafting of Merrill Hippert into the U.S. Army. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, which is the exciting part for some. Merrill's unexpected entrance into the U.S. Army was an example of a bend in the road. Life does not always go as planned. However, a person has a choice to use the lemons to make lemonade, which is exactly what Sergeant Merrill Hippert did. Born on February 21, 1947, in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, to Malcolm, an RCA worker in Lancaster, and Marie, a knitter in Shaverstown, Hippert has lived in Lebanon County his entire life. He also has no siblings.
After they had me, they quit.
When asked about how his parents felt about him joining the military, Hippert quickly corrected by stating,
Well, I did not join. I was drafted in 1968. So
this was an important distinction to him because it was clearly understood that it was not a choice.
About it, but it was something that I had to do.
After making it clear that the experience was not voluntary, Hippert elaborated further about being drafted on September 7, 1966. He said he had to attend basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and Fort Gordon, Georgia. It was not something he had to work hard to remember. The horrible experience he described remained fresh in his mind.
Been away from home like that, and during the time we were in, it was pretty horrifying.
Later on in the interview, when asked to recall the hardest part of the military lifestyle, Hippert quickly admitted,
the first part of the training, the basic training, was really the toughest part as far as at that time when I was in, you were just hollered at all the time. And I mean hollered at and be sort of belittled, and, you just weren't used to something like that, and it was like when I went to Georgia, it was all sand, and you'd be hollering at the drill sergeant would be hollering for you to get off their grass, and there was no grass. It was all sand, and it was so scary. Uh, and I think today,
despite the dreadful treatment, a highlight during Hippert's basic training was that he attended firearm training, where he achieved expert marksman status and received a medal as well as qualified for this. He recounted that he was aiming for a range record on the amount of hits without misses. Fortunately, basic training finally ended, and Hippert continued on his medical training at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. After his training in Texas, he proceeded to the Phoenixville Army Hospital in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania for 6 months to complete his medic training. While working in the Phoenixville Army Hospital, he shared that his work schedule closely mirrored that of a regular job, consisting of 7 or 8 hours per shift, which allowed for days off as well. Hippert relayed when asked if he felt like the training prepared him for saving lives.
I thought it did. It was very good training, and after I graduated from my training like that, and worked in one of the Phoenixville hospital, which even we had more training. I thought I really was well prepared.
Hippert also elaborated that he had extensive training in the event that he would be sent to a war zone to work with soldiers who need treatment from gunshot wounds or very drastic, life-threatening injuries. During this time as a medic, Hippert emotionally conveyed that the hardest part of being a medic was when he first arrived at the Phoenixville Army Hospital. It was one of the largest areas on the East Coast where wounded Vietnam War soldiers were brought for treatment.
That was a little overwhelming at times, to see how bad they were injured. Uh, that was one of the toughest parts of my job, and that sticks in my head a lot.
He movingly recalled how difficult it was to see the soldiers coming back dismembered, yet how gratifying it was to be a part of helping them. One friend that Hippert wound up having to treat for 7 or 8 gunshot wounds while working in Phoenixville Hospital was Billy Carpenter, a future Lebanon County Commissioner. This patient qualified as the worst injury situation that Hippert dealt with while serving as a medic. Hippert tells listeners.
He probably had, if I can recall, it was like 7 or 8 gunshot wounds, and he was really in bad shape. And he was the worst one that I ever dealt with.
Tending to just one gunshot wound is a challenge, but 8, that takes a whole lot of skill. It was even harder for Hippert because Billy was a very good friend of his, so the drive to stabilize him was even higher. He felt pleased that he could help him and expressed that Billy Carpenter still remembers Hippert treating him. Serving in Phoenixville allowed Hippert to develop some true friendships with patients who were ambulatory. He also conveyed how grateful he was during the time to be able to remain in touch with family and friends relatively easily. Hippert was even able to drive home whenever he had enough days off from the hospital. In addition to the experience in Phoenixville as a medic, Hippert was also ordered to serve in Munich, Germany for 13 months. Working in Munich, Germany at the hospital was a definite high point for him, even though he only worked there for 3 months to experience more training. Although he basically worked in every section of the hospital, Hippert affectionately looked back on his memories at working in the children's unit of this hospital for a week or two. During this time, he generally cared for about 10 to 15 patients at a time, where he would be doing checks on those who were being treated for injuries and did not treat anybody for diseases. In addition to working in a hospital in Germany, another part of Hippert's service as a medic entailed being part of the Mobile Surgical Army Hospital, or the MASH unit, which Hippert recollected to be the easiest part of the military lifestyle.
Probably the easiest part is when I got sent over to Germany. We were a MASH unit, that's Mobile Surgical Army Hospital, similar to what was on TV, the MASH TV program. And, we used to go out in the field and set up our hospital. And, it was like you were on a regular uh, 7 to 3 shift that you worked, and then you were off, and you could go and do other things.
Later on in the interview, Hippert merrily reflected on working in a MASH unit as being great.
Um, it was great. I mean, when we didn't have to go set our hospital up in the field for support. All we had to do then was work on our medical equipment to make sure everything was in specs and in good working order. And it was it it was easy, really.
He claimed to enjoy working in a hospital, and during this time he learned a great deal.
Making his experience in Germany even better was receiving a promotion to sergeant, which he received while he was stationed there. Hippert recalled this moment to be gratifying since he had attained this status in less than 2 years. When Sergeant Hippert was not working to save the lives of heroic soldiers, he had a few favorite things to do. He was fortunate enough to be able to travel across several European countries during his time off. Talk about a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Some of the countries he has seen and toured while off duty include England, Denmark, Holland, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland.
Probably the best trip I had was a 2 week vacation that I went to England for a week, and then I went to Denmark for a week.
Hippert's favorite trip was his journey through England because of being able to understand everyone a lot better. He recalled that it was a little more difficult in other countries due to the lack of English speakers. Hippert was quick to admit that he probably wouldn't have ever been able to see so many countries in Europe if he had not been drafted into the service. He even detailed how lucky he truly was because a buddy of his had a car, so they would travel to Austria and Holland, which was only a few hours away. While in Austria, he stayed for Christmas. During that time, he was able to witness the 90-meter ski jump at the Olympics from right outside his window.
and it was pretty cool walking up there and standing on the edge of that ski jump, and you're just it was scary. I can't believe how those guys can do that. You're out looking out into the Alps like that, so high off the ground. But that was nice. I enjoyed that.
Even though the Vietnam War was tragic and distressing, Sergeant Hippert managed to still make the best of his time in the service. While in Germany, he and a friend decided to surprise one of their other friends who they had not seen in a while. They had asked a few guys where he was, and they were told that he was most likely shaving in the bathroom.
We went in there and we both stood on either side, and he saw our faces in the mirror, and he turned around and just looked, and then he came around and just grabbed us both and hugged us. So that was the first we saw him in a long time.
It was evident that this occasion was a heartwarming experience for Hippert. It was also an example of how friendships made the harsh times of war a little bit more tolerable. Luckily in Germany, Sergeant Hippert had close friends to feel supported and to be around, since the only way he was able to keep in touch with family and friends at home was through letter writing. After 13 months of traveling and letter writing, Hippert's time in Germany and in the military ended. Sergeant Hippert vividly remembered the last day of his service in 1968.
I flew home from Germany, from Frankfurt, Germany, to Fort Dix, New Jersey, along with one other friend of mine that he lived in St. Louis, and my parents were there at Fort Dix to meet us, and that was the first time I had seen them in 13 months. So that was really great.
Returning home was a true joy for Hippert. Everybody was overwhelmed with emotion because he was finally back in the United States. However, Hippert acknowledged that this type of reception was not what soldiers who battled in the Vietnam War received.
The guys, that were in the battle over there in Vietnam, I thought should have had more of a reception than what they did when coming home.
Nevertheless, Hippert's return home was memorable for him in a positive way, even though he had trouble making the adjustment to civilian life. Hippert divulged that he took some time off when he first got home, but he really did not struggle with returning to work. Hippert felt it was a lot like the shift work he had already been doing in Germany. He elaborated that the hardest part for him was that he was no longer able to tour countries like he had been able to do before. Although Hippert was reluctant to be drafted into the service, he was able to see the many benefits this opportunity provided him. Due to this experience, Sergeant Hippert reflected easily on the numerous life lessons he learned from his time in the service. He realized that his experience made him depend more on himself than on other people.
It made I would say it made a better man out of me, you know, learning learning the different things. It just made a better person out of me.
He also expressed that the service taught him to respect other people because he had to respect his higher ranking officers and other enlisted men in the service, so the idea of respecting others transferred to other people more naturally. When he was first drafted, Hippert relayed that he believed it took away 2 of the best years of his life.
I always thought 2 years of the best times of my life when I was younger. But learning what I did, being in the military, I thought really helped a whole lot.
For the future generations, Hippert advocated for individuals to join the service and enter into a specialized training program in order to help people in some way. When Hippert was asked what he would like others to know or remember about him, he responded,
Probably to know that I served my country, and that I really was helpful to all the guys that came back that were wounded in action.
Sergeant Hippert wants everybody to know that
That, when you were in there, every day wasn't a cakewalk. And, even though you didn't see combat action, uh, it still was a tough time.
As a 74-year-old man, Hibbert seemed to reflect fondly on many of the experiences he had during his time in the service. The simile that life is like a box of chocolates because we never know what we are going to get rings true, and often we receive something far better than we ever thought possible. Sometimes a person may not realize just what he or she needs. Sergeant Hippert's story emphasizes that no matter which piece of chocolate you get, it is important to enjoy the unique taste of each one and to make it memorable. Thank you, Sergeant Hippert, for your service in the military.
Thank you, Sergeant Merrill Hippert, for your service.